Welcome to Season 1, Episode 5 of the Twisted English Stories podcast. I'm your host, Frank Davis, and it's another rainy night. Today's story comes from the Twisted English Omnibus, available on Amazon and wherever fine books are sold. The title of the story is called Americana. And before we dive in, make sure to give us a like, comment, review, follow us on YouTube, Podbean, or Spotify, and please tell a friend. It really helps the show. And now, today's story, Americana. Americana. Two boys crouched at the edge of a small clearing. They peered outwards past the trunks of eucalyptus trees towards the church parking lot in the distance. It was a Catholic church. There seemed to be a church on every corner of their small town. From where they crouched, they could see the side door of the church. This was the door through which the priest and his retinue would enter. They had to be able to positively identify the priest. This was crucial because if asked who had said Mass, they could truthfully answer. The boys were brothers. Bobby was 12 and Frankie was 2 years younger. They often waited as they did now in the eucalyptus woods for the Mass to begin. They waited 5 or 10 minutes to make sure they hadn't been seen. Then they exited the woods on the side farthest from the church. Later, unseen by the eyes of the faithful, Frankie and Bobby would enter the side door of the bowling alley and make their way to the video game arcade. They waited, staring out towards the church, their attention fixed as they waited to see which priest would arrive. They were not aware of the two figures who silently entered the clearing behind them. Jeff Carpenter and Sean Johnson wore faded jeans jackets and they smoked. They were frequently mistaken for brothers, partly because they were both tall, with shoulder-length blonde hair and ruddy, pimply faces. While both were tall, almost 6 feet, Jeff was enormously fat, and Sean was astonishingly skinny. The disparity of their appearance gave rise to their nicknames, Fatty and Skinny. They were fixtures in the town. The two friends were always seen together. They walked from their homes in the Oak Grove neighborhood to the shopping center 1 mile distant. Younger kids avoided them. Grown-ups ignored them. That morning, Fatty and Skinny saw Bobby and Frankie enter the eucalyptus forest and wordlessly followed. They had robbed younger children before and had twice burgled homes in the neighborhood. They didn't know if the two younger boys had any money. If the two younger boys had no money, it would be fun to rough them up all the same. Fatty and Skinny entered the clearing unobserved and were halfway across it when Bobby turned. "What the heck are you doing in our spot?" Fatty bellowed. Skinny ran at Bobby and landed a poorly executed flying sidekick. Bobby fell backwards. Skinny was astonished to see him roll to his feet. Frankie had spun around at Fatty's bellow and had jumped back almost out of the clearing. They were too far away from the church to be heard by anyone there, but they might still be seen. Frankie saw his brother roll to his feet. Skinny gathered himself as if to try the same move again. Neither of the brothers had spoken yet. Fatty was fat. He had been a big baby who had grown up to be a big kid and then a bigger teenager. It was nature, not nurture. Fatty's parents were slim health food nuts. In fact, Fatty himself was a vegetarian and an animal lover. He just didn't get along with other people. And that is why he had no problem picking up a fallen branch and swinging it menacingly at Frankie. Frankie was not a vegetarian. His grandpa, who he and Bobby lived with, served meat and eggs and rice. Grandpa was not a vegetarian, but he was a health food nut. He had served in the war. In Hawaii, he had learned jiu-jitsu. In the Philippines, when the ammo had run out, he had fought hand-to-hand with the Japanese. He loved his grandkids and did most of the things other grandpas did with their grandkids. He had also taught the boys Danzanryu Jiu-Jitsu. Fatty moved towards Frankie, expecting the younger boy to flee. As if to prove him right, Frankie darted to the left. When Fatty moved to block his path, Frankie quickly changed direction. He dove at Fatty's legs. Fatty fell backwards, losing his grip on the branch. Frankie scrambled to Fatty's side. The larger boy tried to shove him, but Frankie hugged Fatty's right arm as if it were a pole in a fire station. Frankie jumped on Fatty. He wrapped his legs around the arm and arched his back and drove his hips forward. There was a loud, sickening crack, and Fatty began to scream. Fatty tried to stand. Frankie was on his feet first and swinging his right leg like a baseball bat, he kicked Fatty in the face. Behind them, Skinny tried another flying kick. Bobby caught Skinny's kicking leg and spun the older boy round. Skinny's back hit the ground. His head barely missed smashing against a tree trunk. Skinny managed to stand and Bobby leapt on his back. Bobby tightened his legs around the older boy's waist. This was easy to do because Skinny was so skinny. Bobby's arm circled around Skinny's neck, executing a jiu-jitsu technique called Hadakajime-san. Afterwards, the brothers watched Fatty and Skinny limp slowly from the clearing. Fatty's arm hung loosely at the elbow. Skinny's throat was a raw red color, as if he had escaped the hangman's noose. Perhaps he had. Frankie looked at his brother and said, "Fatty and Skinny went to bed. Fatty rolled over and Skinny was dead." "Genius," Bobby replied, looking admiringly at his brother. "Come on, Bobby, we can still make it to church on time." Thank you for listening to this episode of the Twisted English Podcast. I'm your host, Frank Davis. Be sure to follow us on Podbean, YouTube, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. Also, check us out on Amazon. The Twisted English Omnibus has a plethora of stories for you to amuse yourselves with. Enjoy the rainy weather, folks. See you next time.